Alright, welcome back everybody. The previous video got cut a little short during editing, so we're going to go through that really quick once more. So once you have a connection set up, the next thing we need to do is we need to set up an ability to get access to one of our collections. Now, as we said before, a collection is just a collection of documents that all have similar content. So our blog posts would be in one collection, while our dogs would be stored and all their relevant information would be stored inside of another collection. Now, just like the Mongo connection file, the Mongo collection file will be, you can use it and modify it as you need to, but feel free to use anything that I've just highlighted for your own personal use and for your use throughout the course, because we're going to do a very fancy sort of little technique in order to make sure we only have one reference to each collection being passed around, no matter how many times the function to get the collection is called. Now, the benefit of doing this is that we can define all of our collections inside of one module. We don't have to make a new module per collection to get access to it. And just this will allow us to require a reference to our collections once, and then any file that needs each collection can use any of the collections possible. This is one of those other fancy functions that return a function. In our case, we're saying return a promise that resolves to the collection if the database connection works and if there's no error while retrieving the database collection. So that would allow us to have syntax such as requiring the Mongo collections and then storing a reference to the dog collection, then calling dogs as a function, which will return a promise to the dog collection, where you use the then function, the then property of the promise, with a dog collection as the callback parameter, and then we can do the operations we want. Now, as you'll notice, I have an entire file that's called dogs.js that just kind of wraps around a few Mongo functions. Now, you might wonder why we're doing something like this. Well, it's always easier to write an abstracted layer on top of your database in the long run. For one, you don't want to be writing database queries over and over and over again, because you're going to be doing the same thing, the same exact thing, over and over and over again. And it's much harder at a glance to say, for example, oh, what are we finding here when we have a bunch of descriptive objects that describe what we're looking for, rather than reading a function saying, oh, get dog by ID. That's going to return a dog, and I'm going to provide it at ID. So that's much simpler to read and much simpler to maintain. Secondly, it's much easier to fix a bug in an abstracted layer where you use that layer everywhere, than it is to update 500 queries that are wrong in your entire application. An even better reason is the fact that you may one day change your database engine. We could write an abstraction over dogs, over our dog data, where we go from storing it in a file, then we could one day switch to storing it in MongoDB, then maybe we decide to store it in MySQL later on. Or maybe one day after that we decide to store it in Elasticsearch. We will never be bound to rewriting queries in every part of our product or project if we have this abstraction layer. These layers, like this dog file, which will also be a post file, for example, post module, will allow us to only have database queries in one file. That way, you don't have to worry about writing Mongo queries inside of your routers, which will come later, inside of your front-end work, or anything like that. You'll only have to worry about it in the area that it makes sense. This is great to separate your code, and it makes it much more testable, much more readable, and so on. Now, as a little tidbit, you'll notice that we're defining properties in an extreme shorthand now using ES6, where we just start an object and we write get dog by ID, which is the function name, and put a parentheses with the parameters, and then we just start defining the function. This is shorthand that our get dog by ID function ID blah blah blah, or get dog by ID function ID such as that, blah blah blah. Now, these two are slightly fundamentally different, but that's beyond the scope of the course, but they all end up doing the same thing. Adding an object to an exported object, which will to the exported methods object, which will be exported in the module, that takes an ID and will return a promise that resolves to a single dog. So that's how you connect and use collections in MongoDB, and that's why you abstract. Several times in my career, I have switched database engines, not of my own choosing sometimes, but it's just what's necessary at times. And having this abstracted layer above it has helped every single time. The 2 times we did not have it, it definitely was a mess. So that's why we do things like writing a module that just does basic operations for us. All right, well, with that being said, that was collections and connections. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Have a great night.